As a rabbinical student who associates with sailors, I was naturally drawn to Parashat Noach. And while I could regale you with tales of men on ships, I instead offer you a thought by Plato. Unless either philosophers become kings, or those whom we now call our kings and rulers take the pursuit of philosophy seriously and adequately, there can be no cessation of troubles. Plato, like most philosophers, would have us believe that the perfect world naturally is ruled by philosophers. His statement illustrates the timeless battle between intellectuals, men of science, wisdom, men of books, and warriors, men of strength, of valor, of the sword, the men who almost always rule. The debate is historically framed in different ways. Hellenists versus Maccabees. Mathletes versus athletes. In every generation, the struggle manifests itself. Take, for example, the rabbis versus the Amei Haaretz. On one hand, the rabbis devalue non-Torah work. Rabbi Elazar says in Yevamot, no occupation is inferior to that of agriculture. In Sanhedrin, he submits a rabbinic ideal. I conclude that one was created to labor in Torah. In the perfect rabbinic world, we were all created to labor in the Torah. Talmud Torah, Keneged Kulam. On the other hand, built into the rabbinic system is a pushback, a recognition that intellectualism is never going to build bridges, it's never going to put up roads, it's never going to even build the structures in which we do the Torah learning that we wish to do. Toiling in Torah will never put food on the table, nor will it support a family. Our Judaism does not honor polar piety above all. The tension between rabbi and worker is self-recognition that the poles cannot stand alone. And so it is taught in Pirkei Avot, Yafet Talmud Torah im derech eretz. Beautiful is the study of Torah with the way of the world. How wonderful are the rabbis who both do occupations of the world and learn Torah. Rabbi Yochanan made sandals. Rabbi Yoshua made charcoal from peat. The medieval commentator Rashi made wine. The play, there need to be together. An interesting play on this tension comes in Midrash on Parashat Noach. In Genesis 11, at the end of the Parsha, we are introduced to the ideal rabbinic man. Ve'ela toldo Terach, Terach holided Avram, Terach begat Avram, our patriarch. In chapter 10, we are introduced to his polar opposite, to Nimrod. Vechush yaladet Nimrod, hu echel liyot gibor ba'aretz. Cush begat Nimrod. He was the first mighty man on earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Al ken ye'amer, ken Nimrod, gibor tzayil ibnei Adonai. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. We are told of his kingdom, beginning in Babylonia and continuing through Assyria, that he built Rehovot, Kala, and Nineveh, one of the great cities of the ancient world. The two characters, a mere chapter apart, represent two polar opposite worlds. Avram, the father of monotheism, who will accept the command, Lech Lecha, go to an unnamed location because God told him to, takes faith and commitment in Torah to the extreme. Nimrod, hunter, warrior, ruler. Nimrod is a man of the field. He's the king of the blue collar. To the rabbis, Nimrod represents the biblical incarnation of the Greco-Roman ideal specimen, athletic, driven by ego. In Bereshit Rabbah, chapter 38, the two worlds collide in the assertion that Terach oved tzlamim hava. Avram's father was a manufacturer of idols. You may have heard the story. In the classic Midrash, a youthful Avram, when temporarily placed in charge of his father's manufacturing business, does his best to discourage his customers from succumbing to sin and buying idols. In a stroke of brilliance, he smashes all the idols save the largest one. When asked to explain what happened, Avram says, the big idol killed all the others. This episode, a snippet of a midrash that seems to be well known by every Hebrew school kid, often to the chagrin of every Hebrew school teacher, sets up the fateful showdown between Avram and Nimrod. Avram's father, consumed with anger, brings his son to King Nimrod for disciplining. At the trial, a debate ensues, wherein Avram takes Nimrod through a logic game, a philosophical treatise on the oneness of God. Nimrod protests, Milin ad mishta'eh. You are just bandying words. We will worship not but the fire. Behold, I will cast you into it, and let your God, who you adore, come and save you. We know the ending. Avram is cast into the fire, and lo, God comes and saves him. But the rabbinic vilification of Nimrod extends beyond just this legend. As king of Babel, Nimrod masterminds the ultimate attack on God in building the tower to declare war on the heavens. Nimrod orchestrates a fiery auto de fe on defenseless children, no less, by some accounts murdering some 70,000 youths. Bad guy. In his commentary on the passage in Genesis 10, Rashi summarizes the evilness that is Nimrod. What does it mean that he was a Gibor Said? That he was a master trapper? He would ensnare people's minds with his mouth and lead them astray to rebel against the omnipresent. Rashi, and later Ramban, a little bit more emphatically, argue that biblical names have great meaning. So examine the name Nimrod. The root, Mem Resh Dalet, means rebellious or revolt. So Nimrod, therefore, means, let us rebel. Our conclusion must be that Nimrod is nothing but bad news. The commentators who seek the simplest meaning of the text, led by Avraham ibn Ezra, rush to the defense of Nimrod. Al tefakesh ta'am l'chol hashemot im lo nichtav. If a reason is not given, don't seek a rationale for biblical names. Meaning, unless directed otherwise, we don't blame a man for the name his father gave him. In reading the verses from Genesis 10 for the Parashat value, he understands the character of Nimrod not as an enemy of Avram, but as a different friend of God. Ibn Ezra writes, and he is the first to make the might of humans over beasts to be visible, because he was a mighty hunter. And the reason the text refers to Nimrod as Lifnei Adonai, before God, he regularly built altars and offered animals that he hunted on them as offerings. Ibn Ezra redirects our attention to the fact that Nimrod is important enough to license elaboration by the text. What's so special about him? He's a man that aided the progress of civilization. He did it before the Lord, and the Torah cannot just gloss over that. Nimrod, as hunter, warrior, and city builder, is a linchpin of civilization. In this light, the Torah pauses in its persistent push from creation to Avram. Adam begat Seth, who begat Enosh, who begat Canaan, who begat Mahalalel, continuing through Noah and on to Avram. We put this progression of begats on hold. We learn at this little juncture that Nimrod was a hunter, and that's perfectly respectable. He's a provider, and that's to be honored. He turns his talent into his profession, first warrior, then king. A king associated with some of the greatest cities of antiquity, in Babylonia and Nineveh. And he brings forth these cities from a wreckage that was the flood just 3 generations before his time. We have to acknowledge as readers that we get swept away by the big names, by these great spiritual leaders, and we begin to neglect the notion that the world is developing independently of them. It's independent of Abraham, independent of Isaac, independent of Jacob. By putting genealogies on hold, the Torah reminds us that the spiritual fathers of this world are not the only fathers of the Jewish people. It reminds us how the rest of the world, our world, was built by people just like Nimrod. People who toiled and crafted, people who built cities, roads, and bridges, and those people who pledged themselves and their lives to the defense and preservation of those societies. And when these people live lives of holiness, when they live Lifnei Adonai, they too are worthy of our praise. As a society, we value the intellectual elite. We value jobs that make big money and have huge impact. Doctors, lawyers, bankers, hopefully rabbis and professors. All positions worthy of praise. As an unfortunate result, though, we undervalue other professions. Often this attitude manifests itself with the feeling that certain jobs are not a good place for a Jewish kid. But our nation was built on the sweat of our Nimrods, protected by warriors who worship. We need Jewish Gibborim, people of might. We need to understand that the value of the people, we need to understand the value that people like Nimrod represent, and that our world cannot exist without them. We must resist the urge to vilify them and undervalue them because they are educated differently, or because they don't espouse the ideals that we hold high in our institutions of learning. But these Gibborim are with us already. They are Amenu. They are our people. They are in our shuls and our communities. They send their kids to Hebrew school. They learned that midrash that we read earlier, and they pay synagogue dues. Yes, I agree. We need Avrams. We need people who live in moral bliss. People who learn and preach in our intellectual paradises, in our yeshivot. Our communities need intellectuals, and our Torah will get to that. We spend weeks and weeks and weeks on our Avrams. But we also need Nimrods. People who do what they do, Lifnei Adonai. Jewish builders and manufacturers and laborers who work with integrity, Lifnei Adonai. Jewish firefighters and policemen who protect our communities and our households, who do their work Jewishly, Lifnei Adonai. Jewish sailors, soldiers, airmen, Marines who fight with conscience. This is Lifnei Adonai. For us to be Lifnei Adonai means recognizing these others. We must recognize the need to welcome our Nimrods into our tents because we need each and every one of them. May we be worthy to praise and support those who work hard to produce, protect, and preserve the world which God created, and may we stand together with them, Lifnei Adonai. Hadish Rabbanan. Yitkazal v'yikadash me'rav.